Sydney, Australia. Her specialties are literacy, multimodal literacy, global years education, and gifted education. She has a background as a primary teacher, English high school teacher, and a literary consultant. And she's currently working as a consultant in schools which experience socioeconomic disadvantage. Her roles involve teaching lessons, writing lessons with teachers, and giving workshops for teachers. It's an inspiring role because Lizzie's so happy to learn from the teachers that she works with, and she has an obsession for literacy, middle years learners, and the power of Web 2.0 tools. And Lizzie, I'm going to turn the mic over to you. Please add anything more you'd like to let us know about your background. And the show is yours. So thanks very much for being with us, everyone, and Lizzie today.
Hello, everybody. It's really lovely to be here today, and I know that people will give me feedback if my microphone isn't clear. So the question was, what do I see as the importance of Web 2 tools in the classroom? And in fact, what do I see a Web 2 tool as being? Okay, so I see Web 2 tools as being software platforms that allow our students to have an online presence and allow other students to comment on what they've made and put out there on the web. And just a classic example for adults is Facebook, which is a space where we can share our photographs and other people can comment on them. And Web 2 tools definitely allow us to collaborate and to share what we make. So for example, our students can make digital stories, they can create animations, they can do online mind mapping and so on. So it's just a beautiful opportunity with Web 2 tools for students to have an authentic audience and some immediate feedback for what they've made. So that's just a little bit of a starting point for my idea about Web 2 tools. Okay, so what I want to talk about today is a resource that I made actually with a group of friends in Australia, because what we were noticing was that we had some teachers here that are not quite convinced yet about why Web 2 tools are really useful in the classroom. So I created these resources, and this is the name of the website, Other Worlds. And here's the address of the website where you can pick up the resources that I've made. They're free. So my interest was to create some resources for upper primary students and lower secondary. And I'm using digital tools for English lessons, but in fact they can be used for every subject. So I just wanted to cheer you on. If you happen to be a teacher that isn't an English teacher, you'll still really enjoy these lessons because they very much show how digital tools can be used in a number of subjects. So I chose my favorite 36 free digital tools, and I based my activities on a series of lessons responding to 13 books, but you can certainly use these lessons without having read the books or whatever. And in doing so, students actually make their own multimedia texts. So the big thing you do when you go to the website is you pick up 5 PDFs from the website and download them to your own machine, which is the tools guide, tooltips, lessons, tasks, and an ebook. So now I'll just sort of walk you through the website a little bit so you can see a bit more about what it's about. And these little cartoons here are gorgeous, and I got my friend Gina to make them, so I hope you love them. Okay, so pretty much standard for using Web 2 tools, and even to use my website. You're going to need to have Adobe Flash Player 10 and above. You will need the latest Java and Adobe Reader 7 and above, and they're pretty much necessary for all the lessons that I've created. So I've got 7 picture books that I've used in creating these lessons, and half of them are literature, and half of them are picture books that relate to you know, factual things like you know, there's one here called Alive in the Death Zone by Lincoln Hall, which is about a chap who you know, everybody thought was dead on Mount Everest, and later on it turned out that he was really alive. And then I've got 6 novels as well, which form the basis of the lessons. But as I've explained, if you don't actually use these books, it's still cool bananas. Okay, so when you go into the website, really there's only 2 sections on the website that you're going to find are urgent for you to use. And one section is the PDF section where you'll pick up the resources, and the other section is the blog. And the reason that you'll love the blog is because that's where I've put student work that was done by our students in this project. Okay, so who was my target audience in writing these lessons? I very much wanted to make an appeal to teachers who aren't really sure why Web2 tools are useful. I wanted to put some resources out there that could be good for students to use at home. And I also wanted to make some lessons for students who are gifted, and we're finding that they need something extra in the classroom. So I found that working with Web2 tools, it's really, really important to have a big idea that underpins what you're doing, because otherwise I find that you can have digital busy work. You know, the kids can be really busy, really happy, and really engaged, but actually they're just making a lot of rubbish. So it felt really important to me to have a big idea underneath it all and to make the tasks challenging. So the big idea underneath Other Worlds is just the lovely one that all readers love, which is that reading takes us to other worlds. And also, with Web2 tools, we can actually build other worlds, and we can build those worlds by creating multimedia texts. So those are the 2 kind of central ideas for Other Worlds. Okay, so in Australia, I'm sure it's very much the case in the States as well, but in Australia, we're using interactive whiteboards, and the tasks in these lessons are really good to use with our interactive whiteboards. And something else I'm very proud of with these lessons is that these tasks that I've designed build a really good bridge between reading and writing, so that students have an opportunity to create multimodal text. I've already mentioned that the tools described in this project have applications way beyond English lessons. And my suggestion then is that if you're a teacher who would like to visit the website and you're not an English teacher, you're probably going to like the tools and the tips PDFs. They will be of interest to you. Okay, I need to mention my collaborators on this project, because what I did, once I wrote the lessons, I got my friends to trial them in their classrooms, and we trialled them in upper primary and lower high school to make sure that they were good fun and that the kids enjoyed them, and we got a definite thumbs up from the kids. They really enjoyed the lessons. Okay, so one of the things that I had fun making up, I thought to myself, now that we're working with Web2 tools, I think we need a learning cycle that really shows the generative possibilities with Web2 tools. So the first 2 parts of my learning cycle are really standard. When we read a book, we just have a go at reading, and then afterwards we reflect on what we've been reading about. But the 2 parts of the cycle that I'm really fond of are the respond and reimagine parts of the cycle, because here we can really use digital tools to do something that we haven't been able to do with pen and paper, and that is to create these beautiful multimedia texts and to create these other worlds. And it feels important to me that we actually have tasks that utilize Web2 tools in a kind of higher order way. So when you go to the website and you've got the 5 PDFs, the first one that you might download is called Student Tasks. And this just gives you an overview of the responses to the 13 books. So each page in Student Tasks is set out in this fashion. I understand that you won't be able to read it, but it's just to give you a little vibe of the layout of the Student Tasks. So you can see here then that at the top left, I've made sure to include book trailers that include, when they're doing the reading of the book, I've got book trailers there, and I've got all sorts of interesting online materials that support the reading of the book. And then we move to reflect, and that's where we start using our Web2 tools to reflect. So we might, in this one here, for example, although you won't be able to see it, I'm sorry about that, but the reflect task is a point of view task in which students use Flux Time Studio, which is an animation tool, to create a fantasy world setting for a story that they are going to be writing. And then we move to respond, where students become generative about what they're doing. So this particular page that I've got up here requires students to create some fantasy characters, and to do that they're using Be Funky just to apply some photo effects. And then in the Reimagine section, the task sort of here invites students to use the Kazaa morphing tools to go a little bit further with creating their fantasy characters. So that's the layout of all the student task pages, and that is using the Read, Reflect, Respond, and Reimagine cycle. Okay, so going along with it, you've got a second PDF after the student tasks. You've got the lessons PDF. And what you can see here is that there are 3 columns. Now, in the left column, the tasks are written the way that kids get to do them. So it tells the kids exactly what they need to do. In the middle column, you've got the teaching and learning activities that teachers will be doing to teach the kids. And in the right-hand column, you've got the live hyperlinks to the Web2 tools so that teachers using these documents will be able to use live hyperlinks. And each one of the PDFs has live hyperlinks to go through to the Web2 tools. On top of that, in the resources column on the right, there are also live hyperlinks to the multimedia text that students made during this project. So you can see here there's a bit of a screen grab of the spiral picture, and that's a photo peach task that a student did to show a kid from Morocco in response to the book Mirror, which is quite a stunning book. It's a task to show a child from another country what some of the places around this child's school looked like. So the third PDF that you might pick up from the site is called the Tools Guide. And in starting looking within the Tools Guide, first of all, you have a little bit of a look on a themes page, which just shows you how each book in the set of 13 books relates to the Other Worlds theme. That's just to save teachers a bit of time in understanding about the specific Other Worlds theme. I'm sorry about the dodgy graphics. I know they're really dodgy. Okay, so then moving along within the Tools Guide, you can actually see that for each set of lessons, I've got icons that show which particular digital tool is actually used. And then when you move further into the Tools Guide, this is the bit that people are going to like, because the tools have been categorized. For example, the first set of tools that you come across is background reading for teachers who don't know anything about Web2. There's a background reading page called 21st Century Learning Websites. So that's just to set the scene, and you go through and have a little look with the live hyperlinks. And then I've got a good page here called Very Simple Tools, and that's a really fun one for teachers who haven't played with Web2 before, and they want to have a go, and they're thinking, there's so many tools out there on the web. You know, where do I start, and how do I know the ones that teachers are finding really useful? So that's the page that I would suggest. You know, I noticed there were a couple of people listening today who haven't had a little dabble yet with Web2, and I'd certainly suggest that you go to the Very Simple Tools page there and have a play. And I've got them set up so that if you don't have to register with an email and you don't need to get your students to register, then actually I've got it sort of ticked that it's easy. There's a tick for easy and a tick for not having to register. So you can see, even though these graphics are dodgy, you can see that with many of these tools here, students don't even have to register, which is pretty exciting. Okay. Another way that I've got tools classified in the Tools Guide is according to whether they are good alternatives for PowerPoint. A third way that I've got them classified is in terms of whether they're good for digital storytelling. So I've got things like ZooBurst, which is a 3D storybook, which is really fun. You know, you put in images and they pop up in a 3D kind of manner. They're really luscious. You know, you've got Carnegie Library My Story Maker, which is a gorgeous digital tool because it actually is an animated storytelling tool, and it also allows the kids to put their ideas together, and it actually creates a kind of predictive text for the kids if they're very scared and reluctant writers. And then I'm lingering here for a second because I've got something called Wonderful Extras, which just has a few Aussie things in there as well, if you're interested. Okay, so just to summarise then, a few extra things within the tool guide that I won't linger too long on, but I've also classified tools into painting, comic and animation tools. I've got some good research tools for you, some general purpose reading and writing tools, and very much an exploration of copyright and cyber safety if it's your first time playing with Web 2. Just those basics about making sure that children don't include their last name in their logins, making sure that they don't put identifying details into work that they post online, just making really sure that if you've got students in your school who are on what we call in Australia a media ban, which means that they've got a non-custodial parent who's kind of after them, you've just really got to make sure that you know which kids in your school are on that media ban so that you can work in a very special way with them to make sure that they're not identifiable. And then I've got some lovely working tools, which are just some really good all-purpose working tools for when you're building your confidence with technology. So then I've got another PDF. So far we've had a look at student tasks, we've had a look at the lessons, and we've just had a look at the tools guide. But I've got a fourth PDF called Tool Tips, and this is where I take one page for each of my favorite 36 tools. And so at the front of the Tool Tips PDF, I've got each of the tools with a quick explanation of just a couple of words that explains exactly what that tool does. So I think that's quite funky, and you might want to just bear that in mind. That's just a quick one-page look at what each tool is about. And then there we've got the layout for each page of the tooltips document. Just explains a little bit about what's quirky about working with that tool. Some tools are incredibly simple, but other tools have strange little habits, really. And the tooltips just gives you a bit of a hand with knowing what's a bit strange about that tool. Okay, and then finally, the fifth document on the website is an ebook in which I've just written up the project in a kind of chatty way. And the benefit there for you, probably no one's really going to bother ever reading the ebook, to be honest. Let's be real. But if you ever did have a moment in your very busy lives, the thing about the ebook is that I've got extended pieces of student writing, which I didn't put into the lesson plans, obviously. So if you have a spare moment and you want to see some of the longer pieces of writing that the students in this project did, have a little pop into the ebook, and some of the kids' work is really gorgeous. Okay, I mentioned originally that when you go onto the Other Worlds website, there's really two places you're going to want to visit. One's the PDF section that I've just walked through, and the other section is the blog section. And when you click on that, you get taken through to a special blog that I've set up. And this is where I would really invite you very heartily. I would just so love for your students in the USA to put some of their product onto this blog, so that I would be very excited to show this with my Aussie students. So to do this then, you go onto this blog, and down the bottom of the page you can see a little comments link, and that's where your students can submit the URL that is has been created when they made their beautiful multimedia text. So please, I do invite you to get your students to submit work here, and I will be a distinctly happy chappy. Alrighty, so let's just have a look at some of the stuff that's already on that blog. So for example here, we've got something that a girl called Catelyn made, and her task was to create a fantasy world setting and to show us her hero and her villain, and to create a space that another kid in the class then would actually be able to write a short story from. So this is a slideshow, a Kazoa slideshow called The Enchanted Forbidden Forest of Yucano. And then another child in her class was able to use this story starter to write a short story set in that place. And I really think this is the great benefit of Web2 tools, is that children can make these beautiful other worlds in a way that just can't be done with pen and paper. So let's look at this one, for example. This was a mixed book that a kid called Jaden made. All of these, by the way, you can link to from the blog I mentioned a minute ago, and you can actually see the mixed book that Jaden made. But he had to create a mixed book that actually showed a theme in action. This is a child that's 10 years old, and he made a really lovely one that showed a character moving from loneliness to happiness. And I probably should say here that when kids are working with Web2 tools, they need very explicit teaching about how to design and compose their work. And they really need to learn from you about visual literacy and the layout of a really good page, because that's what we've found out with kids in Web2 tools, is they need our help in composing their multimedia text. They really need our explicit teaching. So here's that one I mentioned earlier, the photo peach task, where a student had to show a kid from another country what their place looked like, so that people can have some understanding of each other's worlds. Okay, here's an example from the lessons where this is again in response to the book Mirror by some high school students, in which they had to talk about the similarities and differences with living in Australia and Morocco, using a Venn diagram from classtools.net. And so yeah, that's just a little simple example. And this, of course, is yet another. All Web2 tools allow kids to save their work on the internet and to go back to them later, and also to share their work with friends and family by sharing the URL. So that's just the really fun thing about Web2, is that that you've got real life people enjoying your work. Here's a gorgeous one by a kid called Vanessa, and she had one of her characters in her story, actually, that she wrote is a bit of a melancholy character, and so the task was to write a storybird picture book from the perspective of her main character. And so this, again, all of these are on the blog that's linked to my website. And so her character is asking some really deep questions about how the way the world works and why is it so, and that's an enchanting one. So I've tried to give you a few little tasters there of some of the multimedia text that the students have made in the project, and I really invite you to have a little play on the blog attached to my Other Worlds website, so that you can actually see some of the products and some of the text that the students have made. So I thought I'd get down now into a little bit more precise detail of some of the actual tasks associated with the lessons. So I chose here the 3 research tasks, actually, but I should be really blunt with you that the vast majority of tasks actually in this project are not research tasks, they're actually literature tasks. So I've kind of gone a bit sideways here, and I'm showing you some stuff relating to factual texts, but actually most of the tasks are about responding to literature. Oh yeah, I've said that, sorry, I've just noticed that I'm rabbiting on. Okay, so here we go. Alive in the Death Zone is a book about a chap who was left for dead on Everest and then is actually rescued. So the read task says, what are the qualities of a person who is good in a crisis, and how would you wish to behave in an extreme situation? So I'm trying really hard with my tasks to ask the kids to put themselves on the line and to become engaged. And we certainly found that the kids did enjoy these tasks. So in the reflect task, I say, okay, let's reflect on the impact of Mount Everest on our imaginations. Do you have major life goals, such as climbing Everest? Do you participate in extreme sports? And then after that, I get the kids to do a little bit of, basic research skills stuff. And then the respond task, ask students to use Time Toast, which is a lovely Web2 tool which helps kids to be able, actually adults, because Web2 tools really are often for adults, and they've been co-opted for education because they're so luscious. Anyway, this task requires students to create a timeline of the Mount Everest climb, which is described. So Time Toast is a bit of a blast. If you don't like it, you could use another one called Dippity, which is also pretty gorgeous. Okay, and then in here we've got the Reimagine task, which is kind of the end point of the learning cycle, in which I've asked students to create a Prezi presentation of the stages in the Everest ascent. One of the reasons I've done that is because I find that when people use Prezi, they're often not really bringing to realization the nature of Prezi, which is that it actually does describe a kind of a journey. And I think that Prezi can be really misused unless students or even any of us really have a clear idea about the journey that we want to take our viewers on, and the clear idea about our purpose. So that's a nice simple introduction to Prezi, which is quite literal, but it allows us to explain to our students that Prezi takes our viewers on a journey. Okay, and so then when you have a look in this blog that I mentioned earlier, you'll be able to see Joanna's Prezi that she did of the climb, in which she's inserted images, she's written text and so on to take the viewer on a journey. So the next research task that I did relates to Lost Worlds by John Howe. And John Howe was actually, he's an amazing illustrator who worked on the I've forgotten that book, you know, the amazing trilogy with hobbits. Forgive me. But anyway, he's one of the guys that made all these special effects in that. So he's written a book about lost worlds. Some of them are mythical, and some of them are like Pompeii. And so I asked the question, which is your favourite lost world, and why is this so, and persuade others about the significance. And then in the reflect section, I asked the students to consider, what do the clothing, art and science related objects which are left behind tell us about the culture and the inhabitants of a lost world? And there's a lovely site that they can go to, a History of the World BBC site, which is really gorgeous, and they can have a look in there by theme, and they can have a look by civilization. And what you see when you have a look in there is some really gorgeous artifacts that you can discuss. So in the respond section then, basically I asked students to choose one culture from Lost Worlds to research, for example, Pompeii, and then just using the lovely graphical dictionary called VisuWords, just to make a start on understanding some basics about Pompeii. So there you have a look at VisuWords, and as you click on the little blobs there, you just begin to find some basics out about the topic. And then the Reimagine is actually asking students to use Discovery Box, which is also known by some people as Museum Box. And that's a really fun cube in which students can put lots of information about their topic. So that's really fun. This is the one that was made by Ben, in which he made 3 cubes and 3 layers there. So it can get really complicated, or it can be relatively simple. There's a 5-cube one actually by Buan in West Clay Elementary, which I'm assuming is one of your places in the States. Alrighty, so then we've got some of the fun about working with Web2 is not just what the students actually make, but the fact that they've got an opportunity to reflect on what they've made. So here's Ben's learning journal, in which he's just describing to us how much fun he had when he was using the Web2 tool, and also some of the limitations. So that was a bit of a blast for me. Reading the kids' learning journals was fun. Now we're moving on to a book by Sally Regan called The Vampire Book, which is just a bit of fun exploring vampires, because in Australia everyone's going a bit nuts for vampires. And so I asked here the students to discuss which vampire legends are most interesting to them and why, and to have a think about why so many cultures actually have vampire legends. And this book is a really weird mixture of fact and fiction, And so there's a lot of potential there for you to get kids to really to look at the difference between fact and opinion, and to develop a little bit of critical literacy about what we choose to believe and what we discard. And you're probably really familiar with this website. It's great fun. The one about the Pacific Northwest tree octopus, in which it looks as if you're looking at a factual website, but in fact, of course, it's a way of teaching children not to be fooled by the layout and the codes of factual websites, because in fact they can be just used by anyone with a bias. And this is actually a fraud website that is an opportunity for us to teach kids about the fact that they've got to be a little bit careful and go into the About section of websites to see who the person is and their degree of expertise and so on. And then this is another little fun bit, which is the quick information checklist. Just gives children an opportunity to decide what is the expertise of a website, can the information be checked, and that sort of thing. Okay, so in the Reflect section then, there's an opportunity for students to create a crossword and a quiz with classtools.net so that they can actually test each other's skills about what they've just read. And here is the quiz that the kids made that were in this project. And as I've explained, every quiz that is made with classtools.net is out there on the web with a URL, and the kids can get to it later. The Respond task was using bit strips. Create a 3-frame cartoon which shows the thought bubbles of someone who is secretly a vampire in a modern high school and their friends don't know. So that's a lot of fun, making a cartoon that other kids in your classes can comment on. There's the Bit Strips comic builder, very nice and easy to use. And then the Reimagine task is using Domo Animate for an animation task. And it's an opportunity for a first-person point of view task where a vampire talks about what it's like to be a vampire to an audience of primary school viewers. And then I've just got one that I just put something of my own on here because mostly it's other people's work. So that's just a little one that I made. So